Shabbat Shalom, everybody. You know, like many of us on this Zoom right now, I really enjoy listening to NPR. I love how there are all these wonderful shows on NPR that do these incredible deep dives into our human experience, that tell these engrossing stories, that interview these fascinating experts, and that really explore what makes us tick as human beings. But I have to say that I was listening to a show on NPR this week and it really ticked me off, actually. And I'll tell you why. First, they played a clip from CNN recounting what's going on in this country right now. And they talked about all of the ways in which facts have been obfuscated, bold-faced lies have been shared, distortions have led to insurrection. And then, without skipping a beat, they shifted to the extreme media on the other side, basically saying exactly the same thing back, saying that it's only the Democrats or whatever, or the people, the lefties, or whatever they were saying, were twisting facts and truth and promoting all kinds of violence and evil in the country. And then they kept doing it back and forth again and again. They would have mainstream media giving reports based upon facts, upon science, and then they would immediately juxtapose it with extreme right-wing media that gives reports based on conspiracy theories and on lies. And I found myself shouting at the radio, no, don't do that. You're creating a message of equivalency here, and there's no equivalency. But they were relentless. They kept going back and forth and back and forth. And of course, the purpose actually of that show was to make me very uncomfortable. They know who their listeners are. They were actually trying to make us uncomfortable on this show, hearing the equivalency that is being suggested in distorted messages in our media right now. Actually, the show was an interview with a Princeton psychologist whose name was Emily Pronin. And her expertise is the area of our psychological blind spots, the things that we tend to blot out, that we don't notice. You know, when we think about our views on politics or on the world or how society should be, we're all good people, right? We all know that our perspectives are based on truth and fact. They're based on an embrace of what is important and significant, on good values in life. We all know that about ourselves. But maddeningly enough, people who are on the other side of our polarized society feel exactly the same way as we do. So what on earth is going on here? So Pronin points out several very complex psychological realities, one of which she calls the introspection illusion. And the introspection illusion, in a nutshell, works like this. We all have actually a very distorted perspective of our own motives and our own way of looking at the world. If I ask you who is the most important or the most significant one who has the perspective on your experience and your worldview, you're going to say, well, it's me. I have the most clear perception of my choices. I know what I know to be true. I know what my feelings are and my intentions. I know what my life story is. I know all my hopes and dreams. I know my values. I have a really clear sense of why I know what I know and why I believe what I believe, right? Well, the answer is actually wrong. You don't know, actually, hardly at all why you believe what you believe. You just think you know why you believe what you believe, right? And the greatest blind spot is our own biases. Our brains filter out a tremendous amount, particularly our bias, about why we think what we think. And if you want an example of how this works, you know, a funny example is the age-old arguments that many couples have about what temperature to set the thermostat at in their house, right? Well, most of us are very familiar with that fight. right? You have one, you have he says keep it at 68 degrees and she says keep it at 73 degrees. And each one thinks the other one is meshuggah. Why would you possibly think that? You're crazy. It's too cold. It's too hot. Whatever it is, what's going on? Actually, what happens is you have a bias, you have a personal preference, but the higher brain then comes up with all kinds of proofs and explanations about why your random preference is the correct one. And then once you have all of those proofs, that becomes locked in as a matter of your identity. So you feel it deep down in your kishkas, you're right, which means the other person's got to be meshuggah. That's how it works. So now, what's the message here that we're getting from psychologists? We're getting that we are all this combination of confirmation bias and the introspection illusion. So we don't really know what we're talking about when we say what we believe. The problem is when I listen to this kind of point, I'm profoundly disturbed by that, because I say, well, wait a minute. So there really is moral equivalency between one side and another, and what's going on in this country right now at this moment in history, where we all don't know what we're talking about? The answer is a resounding no. There is no moral equivalency between seditionists who want to attack our democracy and people who want to protect our democracy, who want to protect science and fact and discernible truth. We cannot make that difference. So no matter what psychology says, there is a right and there is a wrong. We see dimensions of this even in this week's Parsha. We have God who tells Moses to go before the Israelites as these plagues are beginning, to announce that it is God who sends him, that it is God who is going to take them out of slavery to freedom. And there's this very powerful line in the Parsha where it says, "V'lo shamu el Moshe mikotzer ruach u'me'avodah kasha," which means they didn't listen to Moses. They couldn't hear Moses. Mikotzer ruach, which literally means a cut-off spirit, and avodah kasha, and from their hard labor. So what exactly does that mean, a cut-off spirit and hard labor? Many commentators try to explain this. The Seforno, for example, says they simply weren't able to hear what he said. They couldn't believe it because they were so cut off in their ability to see a world beyond their own enslaved experience that they couldn't process it. Even if Moses was telling them a truth about why things were happening around them, they simply couldn't process it. And the Chizkuni makes another explanation. He says, another reason why they simply couldn't hear it is because they were constantly oppressed and they were afraid that Moses' actions were going to make their labors even worse. So they were defined by their fear. This is an important insight into human nature, which resonates with what we learn from psychology. The Israelites had been for generations in slavery, and they were steeped in a life of oppression and fear. And because they were steeped in fear, they simply couldn't hear the truth. Now, the mob that stormed the Capitol last week, and the mob that is threatening to storm the Capitol this week, and the capitals around the country this week, are similarly motivated by fear and by rage, whipped up by our president. Make no doubt about it. They are motivated by those things. And yet, disturbingly, those people, just like you and me, feel absolutely right. This is what I want us to really think about today. They are feeling completely right, like their intentions, just like our intentions, are all good in what they're doing. As profoundly difficult as that is for us to believe, they really believe that. So how does this work? Again, if you have been living in a victim script, if you have been living in a state of fear and rage for so long, eventually, what happens? Our brains adjust. we become inured to that sense of fear that guides our lives. It's like this famous New Yorker cartoon that I once saw years ago, where you see these two fish floating in the water and another fish swims by and says, "Hey, how's the water, boys?" And the one fish turns to the other and says, "What's water?" Right? That's the idea, that these people who are the mob and the people who are the diehard supporters of Trump, even now, are living in a constant feedback loop that is being whipped up into a frenzy by the president and the president's supporters and the president's cohort. So what happens? You create this toxic soup of the mind. Now, the people who are actually taking up arms, the people who are actually planning on executing our democratically elected leaders, those people are way off the deep end. We know that. But they're coming from the same justification, in the same sense that they have good intentions. They also have issues of wanting to feel powerful, using Trumpism as a means to attack others to make themselves feel more powerful. But what about the rest of the diehard supporters of Donald Trump at this moment in history? The rest of the people who are not necessarily violent people, but are still sticking with this very depraved and mentally unstable leader. Those people genuinely believe, I want to say it again, that they are only well-intentioned. They are living really in this introspection illusion where they can only attribute good intentions to everyone who agrees with their cause, and even to Trump, even as he makes policies that are inciting sedition, or even as he makes his other bigoted policies in our nation. They can only ascribe good intentions to that. That's all they can possibly see. And therefore, anybody who disagrees with them or with their compatriots or with Donald Trump himself, they must therefore have bad intentions. That's how the human brain seems to be structured to work. Now, before we feel all self-righteous, because I just delineated this, remember what that psychologist said on NPR. You and I may go, yes, of course that's true about those people, but we're doing the same thing. Like it or not, we also distort. We also have an illusion that we really know our facts. The truth is, ultimate truth is unknowable to us. Now there's a quandary, isn't it? Where does that leave us then? Are we saying, well, who's to say? Maybe they are right. Maybe we're wrong because, we're all deluding ourselves. Well, in order to answer that question, I actually want to share something I saw on Facebook that was posted by my colleague, Rabbi Joshua Heller. He said it really beautifully. He said, maybe there's no way that we as individuals can absolutely know if we're right. Okay, even if you make that argument, a good rule of thumb? If there are Nazis marching on the same side as you, that's a pretty good indication that you're on the wrong side of history and that your perspective is morally wrong. That says it all as far as I'm concerned. Look around. Are Nazis agreeing with you? Yep. Then you are wrong, right? And there you go. So, I say a comment but facts exist. Of course facts exist. Unfortunately, people say facts exist on the other side, and they are absolutely convinced that those are facts. And that is the great attack on truth that we are dealing with in our society. And our tradition teaches us that there is only one truth. And that's the point I want to unpack right now. Judaism teaches us over and over again that we are all too easily led astray by our own sense of our own good intentions. And what does our tradition want us to understand? We might think we understand what our good intentions are, but the only one who truly knows the extent of what our intentions are all about is the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Only God knows where our biases really lie, where they are coming from. We call God in our liturgy Bochen Klayot, that God literally means God investigates our kidneys. because our kidneys in rabbinic imagination represents the source of our emotions, the hidden source of all of our perspectives and biases that aren't necessarily available to us. But God can look deep into the kidneys and see what's really going on for us. Only God can accomplish that. So what is the message? This is a difficult thing for us to hold on to, but don't trust even your own good intentions, no matter what side of politics you stand on. Don't trust it. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz said the following quote about this to explain this perspective. He says, as it relates to sins of an interpersonal nature, good intentions do not count, even if one's intentions are l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. Why? Because if one hurts their friend, then it is irrelevant what his intentions are. It is like if one sticks their hand in a fire. It is irrelevant why you stuck your hand in the fire. The hand will still get burnt. So what does he mean by this? He means that when it's all said and done in Judaism, it's not what you mean that matters. It is what you do. It is the moral yardstick of what is right and wrong reflected in your actions in the world. We have come to understand that facts are right and lies are wrong. Thank God we have the moral call of Judaism. Thank God we have this clarion call that says, indeed, there is a moral structure in this universe, because Lord knows we human beings get way too easily distorted by our own sense of our good intentions. There is a moral right and a moral wrong. That's the very message of these beginning chapters of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. What is the message that rings out loud and clear? That God does not want the oppression and suffering of the vulnerable at the hands of the powerful and the privileged. And what you want to understand about your life is that if you are on a path that leads ultimately to the oppression of the stranger, to somebody in your midst who is different, who may have a different skin color or a different background or come from a different country, if you are on a path that leads to the oppression of that people, then you are on a path of evil. Now, thank God we have Judaism's moral clarity. And I also thank God for psychology as well. That does point out that we can't rely on our own judgment. There's a higher realm, a higher structure of judgment that we must turn to, which is something that flows directly from our Torah and our tradition. That was never more clear than at the moment like this in history, right? All the more reason that we have to defend the moral call of our tradition, that we have to defend against those who are on, whether they realize it or not, on a path to evil. And I don't invoke the word evil lightly. I don't like using the word evil, but this is a moment in history when we have to call a spade a spade. It is an evil path. Why do I say that? Because it is a path that is seeking to undermine our democracy and to destroy what our democracy is all about. What is any healthy democracy about? It is about giving a voice to the people, to all the people, even the people who seem other or different to the majority. That's the point of a country run by a democracy. And those who attack it are literally defined by evil by what we are reading right now in the Torah. So God willing now, we're going to get through the dangers being posed in the next few days. Please God. And after Wednesday, may we look forward to a much brighter and safer world. But you know what? After Wednesday, we're going to have a lot of work still cut out for us, aren't we? A lot of work. Yes, we have to be aware of our own distorted perceptions. We have to face our own demons, that's true. But most importantly, we have to join together to stamp out a culture of fear and rage that has been whipped up over the past 4 years. And we must not give up on bringing all criminals to justice, going all the way up to the very top. We must seek justice. This is one of those moments where I'm pretty much fire and brimstone as your rabbi, because that's what's going to be necessary for healing. That's what's going to be necessary to restore us from a path of evil to a path of tzedek, of righteousness. We have to eradicate all of the conditions, whether it be through various media outlets, through runaway, unbridled social media and internet, all of the conditions in our society that can lead to extremism, even by people who are well-intended, who become radicalized. We have to wipe out those conditions. We have to become a society that learns how to question even its own good intentions, to always embrace the fact that we can't be certain and that we must rely on facts, on science, on real journalism to uncover the truth so that we can live in a healthier society. May we find the courage to eradicate this path of evil, and may we have that strength speedily and in good time. And let us all say, Amen.